This evening after a cloudy, damp day, becoming mostly dry with just an isolated shower likely, mainly in the north. Rain clearing then overnight, but remaining rather cloudy with mist and fog patches developing, especially in the west. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time, there's a brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Nana. Just after 4 o'clock, I'm Polly Middlehurst, and the top story. The United Nations has confirmed efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from a steelworks in the southern Ukrainian port city of Marriott. A spokesperson says Operation Safe Passage is currently being coordinated between Ukrainian and Russian officials. An estimated 54 people have already been taken to a temporary accommodation centre in the Donetsk region in the east of Ukraine. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's attacks in the east of the country are continuing.
The occupiers are gathering additional forces for new attacks against our military in the east of the country. Russia has brought reinforcements in the Kharkiv region, trying to increase pressure in the Donbas. They've lost more than 23,000 soldiers in the battles of this senseless war, but they do not stop.
Hundreds of people on board multiple small boats have today been intercepted in the English Channel by UK authorities. It follows 11 days in which no small boats crossed into UK waters. Since early this morning, at least 7 vessels have been spotted and intercepted. Around 230 people have now been taken to the UK Border Force Processing Centre in Dover. A series of bullying and sexual misconduct allegations involving MPs in Parliament has seen women working in Westminster share their stories of harassment. Commons Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle is today calling for radical reform to make the House safer and more inclusive. It comes after the MP Neil Parish resigned after getting caught watching pornography in the Commons. Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee Tom Tugendhat says the problem is bigger than Westminster.
I don't think you need to be told what you could and couldn't look at on your mobile phone in a workplace, Alistair. I mean, you're a grown-up, you know the basic rules of society. I don't think it's that hard. And I just think we need to be a little bit more respectful to each other and just remember that in the whole of society, I'm afraid misogyny is still far too much of an issue and we need to address it together.
Well, the Tory party chairman, Oliver Dowden, says the Conservatives will ensure its candidate list becomes more representative. He told the Sunday Telegraph newspaper that the party should reflect the fact that half the population is female. Around a quarter of Tory candidates at the 2019 election were female, but Labour managed to put forward more than half on their list. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, says ensuring a majority of women in Parliament could help tackle Westminster sleaze. May Day marches are getting underway in London today. Members of the public joining trade union members calling for help for workers struggling to manage the cost of living crisis. The TUC says workers need stronger wage bargaining rights and is calling on the government to introduce emergency budgets to give direct support to people with rising bills. And interest rates are expected to be increased on Thursday to their highest level for 13 years. Economists predict the Bank of England will increase rates from 0.75% to 1%. That's a number not seen since early 2009. Members of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee have raised rates at each of its past 3 meetings as part of an attempt to rein in record inflation. That comes as the war in Ukraine adds to the ongoing cost of living crisis. The Business Secretary has written to North Sea oil and gas companies asking for them to come up with a plan to increase domestic production. Kwasi Kwarteng says the industry must invest in homegrown energy production to boost the British economy and bring down consumer bills in the long term. He said firms must also set out plans for investment in clean energy ahead of a meeting in the coming weeks. To China now, where dozens of people are still missing after a residential building collapsed. 6 people have been rescued and pulled from the debris of an 8-storey block of flats in the Hunan province. Firefighters have now been searching for survivors for 52 hours since the building went down. With GB News, more news as we have it, but right now it's time for Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, this monologue comes with a warning. Turn the sound down if you're eating, or especially if you're drinking tap water as we speak. Now, I'm one of those people who goes to a restaurant and I'm an ardent complainer because I like high standards. I'm always polite, though, because my life is in their hands. But when it comes to the water, I always insist that that water comes from the tap and not the bottled kind from one of those drinks companies, which always ends up being 5 times the price. I mean, how different can it be? It's only water, right? This made me think again. Lavatory waste could be converted into drinking water under a new toilet-to-tap proposal. Sorry, come again. I can barely say that out loud without feeling a wave of nausea. Are you taking the pee? That would also be in there as well, by the way. It was basically a study commissioned by the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, otherwise known as DEFRA, to find out what we would see as acceptable water recycling. Now, the rationale for the research was concern that in 30 years' time, water could be in short supply due to, yes, you guessed it, global warming, climate change and the size of the population. Really? No mention of all the current water waste these companies. They actually lose billions of litres daily from leaky pipes. Instead, they want to sell in the idea of us drinking our own toilet waste by using nice words and destigmatising the concept. They spent £53,000 of taxpayers' money to work out whether we would be happy to drink a sewage beverage. I can tell you now, without spending a penny, you first. This study comes after a consultation from the three water regulators, that's Ofwat, the Environment Agency and the Drinking Water Inspectorate, and also after MPs expressed their concern at the amount of untreated raw sewage that the water companies were pumping out into our rivers. Disgusting. What should actually happen normally is that this kind of waste is treated at sewage plants before it's released safely into the river. They tried this wastewater recycling idea in America, and it was known as the showers to flowers system. Guidance from the World Health Organization said that success of portable reuse depends on the ability to gain public confidence and trust. Good luck with that one. They also said that information about the proposals should be made readily available to the public so that they understand the background, context and available options, and that it was important to use positive words. No need to sugarcoat it. You can't polish a turd. Flush this idea down the pan. Right, so before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. So each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. And today, as hundreds of people on board a number of small boats in the English Channel have been intercepted by UK authorities, I'll speak to the former Director General of UK Border Force, Tony Smith Cbe. He'll give us his view of the Rwanda deal, the 11 days we saw no crossings on the Channel, and the events unfolding in Dover today. The Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, what would make Parliament better? The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has called for radical reform to working practices in the House of Commons after a series of bullying and sexual misconduct claims involving MPs. His concerns came as the Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, says half of Tory MPs must be women at the next election. So I'm asking, what would make Parliament better? And Alan Mendoza from the Foreign Policy and National Security think tank, the Henry Jackson Society, will join me for World View. And on the agenda, of course, it's the latest in Ukraine as attempts are made to evacuate civilians trapped in the steelworks in Mariupol. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims Russia has lost more than 23,000 soldiers so far in its invasion of his country. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or why not send me a tweet at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Welcome again to my panel, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Welcome, you both. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good to be back. Thank you.
Well. So, Danny, do you fancy some water?
I think there's an element of sewage treatment that can turn polluted water into drinking water. I know that it's generally used just to release the water back into the rivers and the sea. But if it's safe, I mean, it's not very palatable, the sound of it, but if it's safe, then I'd like Calvin to try first. And I'm going to delegate. And if Calv, there's no signs of ill effect, then yes, I'll follow up with a drinking session, but it's not palatable, is it, the sound of drinking somebody else's urine?
No, and it's all the other bits. Well, remember, everything goes down the toilet.
That's right.
And whilst, normally, as I said, they would normally recycle it and then it would go off into the rivers and then from there on then it would come back into the system.
That's correct.
But for it to go straight from the actual sort of processing to the tap, to me seems a little disconcerting. Calvin, you're pulling a face.
Yeah, it's gross. It's disgusting. It's just odd, isn't it?
It is.
To suggest that we don't have enough springs and wells and natural water. In fact, we're surrounded by the ocean. Can we not purify ocean water first and foremost before purifying human waste? I don't understand why it's necessary. But I'm a bit of a water snob anyway. I don't like tap water. Because I grew up in the Midlands, right? And the population isn't as dense as London. So tap water in the Midlands is fine. It tastes perfectly okay. But come down to London and the tap water is foul. It's disgusting. I can tell, put 2 glasses of water in front of me, I can tell the difference between tap water from London and bottled water. OK, listen, did you hear what he said?
What a challenge.
So this is a challenge, bring it on.
This is a challenge.
We're going to put some, I wish I'd done this, we're going to bring you some bottled water, we're going to put it in a glass and we'll get some tap water and see if you can tell the difference.
But not so the tap water here is filtered, don't forget,
in the
studio.
So you're saying not the filtered water, it has to be.
Yeah.
No, we'll take it from the tap, don't you worry about that.
Okay. Calvin's right about Midlands water. I drink Severn Trent water, which I think is the East Midlands as well. It's fabulous. You come down here, the water's so hard, pebbles come out the tap. Yeah.
It was very hard. And it's
that's right. So it scales up all of your kettles and things like that. Yeah, it's Severn Trent. The Midlands water is far superior. I'm with Calv, but I would love to see his challenge. He's going to put his money where his mouth is.
I'll happily do that. But also, what question does this answer? So they're saying it's population growth. There's too many people. So we need to do something about them. Well, OK, just curb immigration.
There's
that's another solution.
Well, you can do that, but there's also the option, the fact that they lose billions and billions of gallons every single day of water.
How?
Just through leaks and leaky pipes and the old Victorian system. I mean, it's unbelievable. If you go and have a look at the amount of water that they're losing, then they're saying, well, we can drink our own effluent instead, whilst they've reprocessed it, when actually, if they perhaps focused on, improving the network of actually water collection, then I don't know whether we'd need to go down this route. I mean, and we also don't know how the climate would change. I mean, surely, as they're talking about climate change, they're talking about flooding, they're talking about rain, they're talking about... Surely, with all of that, there should be plenty to drink.
It seems to be immigration's fault. Of the climate change.
Yeah, because climate change does not exist.
No,
it's not a real thing.
It's one hell of a conflation.
They're using this magic 2050 date again, aren't they? They're just plucked out of the thin air.
I know, but it was even for me, it was quite a shock. It's quite a shock to hear that.
But if the problem is population growth, the answer isn't make us drink our own pee. The answer is curb immigration.
Well, that's an interesting...
OK, well, just say that we've already got the Rwanda deal, which is working. But we'll be talking more about that. It is, I think it's genius. But we've talked about the fact that I said how many billions of litres of water a day do you think that we lose daily, these water companies that we are paying?
A quiz so early in the show. I know. I'm going for, is this a year or a day?
No, a day.
1.5 billion litres of water.
That's a lot of water.
No, that's a guess. What do you think?
20.
Well, that's ridiculous.
It's so arbitrary, I have no idea.
It's actually 3 billion. Okay. 3 billion litres. Now
how do they know that?
Well, because they can. Well, they know that because they probably work out how much they can hold in the system and how much sort of disappears.
Do you know how much we drink?
I don't know. How much do you drink?
I don't know. 2 litres?
I'm not sure of those figures, but we can have a look and see what we can find.
Well, we will do the test. And it can't just be a binary 1 or 2 test with Calvin.
Right, so get some
I'll bring some West Midlands water down here next Sunday.
Let me just ask you another question. OK, so 3 billion litres of water. How many people do you think daily that would be enough for?
Well, if we drink 2 litres a day on average, I don't know, divide 3 billion by 2 litres.
I can have it because of unfettered immigration.
No.
We're now at 70 million.
No, what do you think?
OK, so it's 3 billion a day.
3 billion a day.
2 litres per person. So that is, I don't know, say 150 million.
20 million litres of water a day.
Okay.
20 million people, sorry, that it would feed.
Yeah.
So that water that they're losing daily would actually be enough for 20 million people.
Yeah.
So sort out the system, block up all the holes, you don't need to drink someone else's urine.
Well, exactly. Pretty much. So I love the way they always throw it back to us and say, look, if we do this to you and we'll sort that out, and it's like, well, OK, you could do that in any case, but we would rather that you actually go back and go into your wonderful profits and your, what you're giving your shareholders and everything else like that, and actually reinvest it into the water system, fix all the leaky pipes. Once you've done that, then do your recalculation and see whether we'd be short of water. And if it works out that we're not, then...
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, what great infrastructure have we built since the Victorians?
Well, that's exactly that. Pretty much nothing. It's a bit like the sort of underground network. It remains the same. It's just it's a very old system.
Do you remember Peckham Springs and Only Fools and Horses? When Del Boy has this idea, this is in the days of the 1980s with the yuppies, and everyone paying £2 for a bottle of Perrier. Yeah. So what he does, he buys empty bottles, he buys some stickers and labels, and quite simply, him and Rodney just use the London water, call it Peckham Springs, go to a farmer's country market and sell it for £3 a bottle.
Yeah. You're laughing, but that is kind of what's happening now. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, with me my panel, Calvin Robertson and also Danny Kelly. After the break, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, what would make Parliament better? The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has called for radical reform to working practices in the House of Commons after a series of bullying and sexual misconduct claims involving MPs. So my question to you is, what would make Parliament better? I'd love to hear your suggestions. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk and tell us what you think. You can also send us that tweet at GBNews, but let's first get you some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy with limited sunshine and outbreaks of rain in the west and southwest. Let's take a look at the details. It'll be a cloudy evening across southwest England with patchy outbreaks of rain. The rain heaviest in the north and over the moors, although some brighter spells are possible too. The southeast of England will be mostly cloudy too, but it'll be drier in general. A little light rain is possible for a time. It'll be a rather damp end to the day for southern Wales, a mostly cloudy picture with outbreaks of showery rain, especially in the west. The cloudy theme to the weather continues across the Midlands this Sunday evening. A little patchy, mostly light rain is possible at times, but most places will remain dry with some bright spells. There'll be a brighter end to the day for northeast England with some sunny spells likely here this evening. The odd shower is also possible, but remaining mostly dry for most. It will be a similar story for southern Scotland this evening. Some sunny spells are likely, and although most places will be dry, the odd isolated shower is possible. Some bright or sunny spells are also likely across Northern Ireland this evening after a cloudy, damp day. Mostly dry with just an isolated shower likely, mainly in the north. Rain clearing south overnight, but remaining rather cloudy with some mist and fog patches developing, especially in the west. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon, welcome on board. It's 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and I'm still joined by my panel, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Now, before the break, we were discussing the news that toilet waste could be converted into drinking water under new plans being explored by ministers, which with concerns over pressures on the water availability in the UK. Let's see what you've been saying. Paul says, I live in London and I agree with Calvin. The tap water is absolutely horrible. Dawn says, no, Nana, the sewer water suggestion is not acceptable. John says, God forbid they build a few more reservoirs. Hi, Nana, recycled water, this is from Paddy. Hi, Nana, recycled water should be fine as long as it's been passed by experts. Well, the experts can drink it first. Right, now, before we went for a little break, Calvin said that he could actually taste the difference of the sort of London water and also the sort of nice bottled water.
Yeah.
So before me, I have two glasses. One is tapped, one is bottled.
Right.
Which one is which? I don't know.
Okay.
So it's down to you to tell me.
Jump in.
You tell me.
Why is this one warm? I'm joking. Okay. Easy. That one's filtered. That one's tapped.
Wow.
He's absolutely correct.
Wow.
Very good, Calvin. Yeah. I'm impressed.
Yeah, that's full of nasty London bio-grade chemicals and stuff, and that one's filtered.
Wow.
Really? Yeah. Wow. OK, we'll do it quick, really fast. Very good. So he can tell the difference.
So don't drink the tap water in London, or if you do, filter it.
Well, it's better than nothing. If you have to drink the water, then, you know, fair enough. But we're saying that water's good, but the one which is made with your waste, I don't particularly like the one from the toilet. Right, so it's time now for our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking what would make Parliament better? The House of Commons Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle says that radical action and a review of working practices is needed. That is, of course, following the series of sexual misconduct and bullying claims about the politicians. And yesterday, MP Neil Parish, he resigned after admitting he had watched pornography twice, not once, but twice, in the House of Commons. The first time was by accident, by the way. Also today, the Conservative Party chairman, MP Oliver Dowden, has said that half of Tory MPs should be women at the next election, as increasing female representation would be key to tackling Westminster's sleaze. So I'm asking what would make Parliament better. I'm joined now by Dennis McShane. He's a former Minister of State for Europe and a former Labour MP for Rotherham. Dennis, thank you very much for joining me. Now, Dennis, do you think that Parliament actually needs this radical action and actual reform? And if that is the case, what do you think would be your top thing that you would change?
It certainly needs something. I mean, when there are reported 57 MPs to some parliamentary committee to investigate sex pest allegations, when women staff in the House of Commons form a WhatsApp group to name 25 MPs amongst themselves, never be alone in a lift or a room with them, that is absolutely dreadful and unacceptable. I think it's becoming as bad as the MP's expenses scandal. We've got a problem, of course, when we have a Prime Minister who referred to hot totty and said, men, take control of your women. It starts at the top. There are far too many. You just watch Prime Minister's Question Times, particularly on the Tory side. There's serried ranks of management consultants behind Boris Johnson. You had that disgusting attack on Angela Rayner by the Tory press last week. It really needs sorting out.
Angela Rayner, because I mean, OK, it was nonsense that the press made such a big deal out of that when Angela herself had sort of made comments that weren't particularly, they kind of sounded like, you know, there was a bit of on both sides there. So for me, personally, you know, that one doesn't work for me. But I do agree that it does seem to be something that needs to be reworked here. And obviously, it's been going on for decades, not just since Boris was there. I mean, it is. Do you think that the idea that if half the MPs are women would really make that much of a difference?
25 years ago, we had the famous Labour landslide, and suddenly the Labour benches were absolutely chock-a-block with women, and Labour has massively increased the share of its women MPs, and yet there are two shadow cabinet ministers said to be reported to this Commons investigation organisation on sex pest allegations. It needs absolutely ruthless action. You shouldn't have had to wait on Neil Parish. He should have been suspended and delisted by the Conservative Party as soon as this emerged. And all the others, that needs to happen. I can tell you as an MP, or ex-MP, I'm sorry, that is the only thing that works. If you think you're going to lose your position as an MP, then you will change your behaviour. So Oliver Dowden deciding that he's going to copy what Labour achieved 25 years ago is not just late in the day, it's irrelevant element in the day. You have to have condign action to clean this out and make the Commons a far more transparent working place than it is today.
Well, listen, that's, thank you so much, Dennis, for your insight. That's Dennis Cbe. He's the former Ministry of State for Europe and Labour MP for Rotherham. So I'm also joined in the studio by former Liberal Democrat MP Lembit Opik. Lembit, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
So what do you feel then Parliament has it always had these problems, and why is it sort of now that they're sort of looking at this situation when, if that is the case, they could have done that a lot sooner?
I really respect Dennis. He's a friend of mine, but I don't share his view. It's for this reason. It's an immensely charged parliamentary environment, and it's intense, and you want intensely committed people there. With that comes a degree of colour. With that degree comes a degree sometimes of flirtation, which is often, and I would say usually mutual on both sides, between politicians, as we well know if you read Edwina Curry's biography, and also sometimes between politicians and staff. I would say the overwhelming period of time that I was there, that was all benign. But there are some cases, as in any work environment, where it goes wrong. But I'd ask Dennis, where does he draw the line? If a Member of Parliament is watching pornography in their state-rented accommodation, should that be banned? If a politician, male or female, asks, say, their member of staff out or somebody else, and they get turned down, is that wrong? Are we going to have an androgynous metrosexual environment where it's simply going to put off some of the highest motivated people? And I'll tell you, if we go down this path, there'll be no Winston Churchills, no John F. Kennedys, no Gladstones, no David Lloyd Georges, all of whom had a lot of colour in their lives, but I would say all four of whom did a good job.
I mean, in terms of the idea that actually if they have 50% women, that will change things, do you think that that's, I mean, this quota, idea of having a quota of women, because what often worries me with quotas is that you end up with people there just because they're black or just because they're, and not actually looking at the qualities that they may bring in terms of their ability to the actual job itself.
I'm against that because I've always been opposed to positive discrimination. What positive discrimination means is you get people who aren't necessarily as good as the other competitors for a job, for example, on the basis of, in this case, their gender, but it can be ethnicity, can be religion. That doesn't work. And Dennis himself commented on this. The Labour Party, during the Cool Britannia phase, they actually did this experiment, and it crashed and burned. Many of the female MPs left shortly afterwards and didn't do a good job. So I don't agree with that. And also, let's be honest, we've had 2 female prime ministers in this country. You can get to the top regardless of your gender.
I think the problem with these ideas, so if you do increase the capacity of women, the amount of women, you make sure it's 50%, and I know the Labour Party actually have more than 50%, what help is there for women in terms of, if they have children, where is the support to help? Because I think in some jobs you might end up with more men because of the type of job they are. And with an MP, you are elected specifically because it's you. So what support is there for women if they're going to make sure that women are in the environment, which is a good thing, but how will women be catered for? And where is the... What thing will deal with that?
It's got a lot better. There's childcare now. When I got elected, there weren't even female toilets in places where you'd expect there to be male and female toilets. In 1997, it was a male-dominated place, almost a gentleman's social club, I would say. And it's got a lot better. But I suppose I would frame it in a different way. What we don't value in this society is the anima, the softer, the right-brain dominant things, the touchy-feely stuff, if you like, whether it's male or female or somebody else. We like the macho, we like the alpha, we like Margaret Thatcher, whether she's male or female, in their embodiment. So maybe the change I would make is getting to principle-centred leadership, where you can have a past. It was David Trimble who said, of terrorists who went on to be great politicians in Northern Ireland, just because you've got a past doesn't mean you can't have a future. If we take the Dennis Cbe route, maybe Dennis wouldn't go this far back, then anything you've done ever on Twitter, on Facebook, a careless email, maybe you've had a few too many, you've made the past, it excludes you from politics. And then we get the greyness that I've been on this programme before telling you is actually slowly but surely corroding the very fabric of our political system.
And very, very briefly, because we haven't got much time, we're leading into the news very shortly, is there some sort of way they can have... Somebody said, oh, they don't have things like HR, and I'm thinking, well, What is there a procedure when something like this happens, especially in the case of the Tory MP? Instead of it going wild and going onto the media in this manner and this ridiculous circus that's followed, is there not a strategic procedure that MPs must follow rather than going to the press to, you know, deal with situations like what happened with Neil Parish?
Yeah, there are two ways. There are standards committee, which can handle this on a cross-party basis, and the parties have their own systems too. But it's just too tempting to take this to the media. And I think that, to some extent, Parish is a victim of media circumstance. He didn't have a chance once this was in the media. Might not be the best way to do it, because you drive the things you don't like underground, you don't stop them.
Maybe they should have a rule about that sort of thing as well, I think, because it's hounding out some good politicians, but also it's you know, but I suppose on the flip side, it is forcing us to re-look at the situation.
If you go into politics now, you've got to accept that not just you, but your family and the friends around you, you're all game as a target. And I think that's putting some great potential politicians off going into British politics. And we're all paying the price for that now.
Yeah, whether you're male or female. Lembit,
Yes.
Thank you so much for talking to me. That is Lembit Opik. He's a former Liberal Democrat MP. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking what would make Parliament better. You'll hear the thoughts from my panel, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories. The United Nations has confirmed efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from a steelworks in the southern Ukrainian port city of Mariupol. A spokesperson says Operation Safe Passage is being coordinated between Ukrainian and Russian officials. An estimated 54 people have already been taken to a temporary accommodation centre in the Donetsk region in the east of Ukraine. Here, hundreds of people on board multiple small boats have been intercepted by UK authorities in the English Channel this morning. It follows 11 days in which no small boats made it into British waters. Since first light, at least 7 vessels have been spotted and intercepted, and at least 230 people have now been taken to the UK Border Force's processing centre in Dover. A series of bullying and sexual misconduct allegations involving MPs in Parliament has seen women working in Westminster share their stories of harassment. Commons Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle is today calling for radical reform to make the House safer and more inclusive. It comes after the MP Neil Parish resigned when he was caught watching pornography in the House of Commons. And COVID guidance in Scotland has changed as from today. People with the virus no longer need to self-isolate, but are still being advised to stay at home. Contact tracing has also come to an end as case numbers there continue to fall. In China, dozens of people are still missing after a residential building in Hunan province collapsed. 6 people have been rescued and pulled from the debris of an 8-storey block in Changsha City, where police say they've arrested 9 people in connection with its collapse. Firefighters have now been searching for survivors for 52 hours. On TV, online and through your radio on DAB+. You're with GB News. Nana Akua will be here after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up to 38 minutes after 4 o'clock, this is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Welcome back. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. Right, so we'll return to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, what would make Parliament better? Westminster has seen a series of sexual misconduct and bullying claims in recent weeks. And yesterday afternoon, MP Neil Parish resigned after admitting he had watched pornography twice in the House of Commons, and it led to calls from the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, to claim radical action and a review in the working practices which is needed in Parliament. And also today, the Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, has said that half of Tory MPs should be women at the next election, as he believes that increasing female representation would be key to tackling Westminster's sleaze. So I'm asking, what do you think? What would make Parliament better? Is it that? Before I speak to my panel, let's have a quick look at what you've already been saying. And Starnes says, abiding by parliamentary standard and ministerial code. That would make it better. Yeah, I hear you. Chris says, I think it sounds like a demolition job. Do you mean the job done on Neil Parish? I think that was what he's saying. Oh, you actually mean a demolition job, actually get rid of them all. No. Pete says, no more Tories. They've lied to us before. They're lying now, and they'll lie again. They're nothing if not consistent. Well, OK, I'll give him that. But then I think a lot of them are telling lies, not just the Conservative Party. I think it's really across the board. Let's see what my panel make of this. I'm joined by Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Calvin. You're one of the sort of ex-Conservative type advisor type characters. So do you think that actually a ratio of 50-50 women would be something that might improve the situation?
Oh, I'll get to that, because I think that first email you read out was spot on. Sticking to parliamentary standards and ministerial code would improve the Houses of Parliament dramatically. I think it's a case of broken window syndrome at the moment. Everyone's seeing that you can be lax about whatever you like, and you can trace a lot of that back down to the Speaker no longer wearing the wig. You know, it sounds really daft, but when you let standards slip like that, it gets progressive.
The Speaker no longer wearing the wig?
The Speaker of the House doesn't wear the wig anymore. and then they made it OK for male members of Parliament to no longer wear ties.
Let me take my wig off and see if you guys change.
but it's a standard. The standards are slipping constantly, and I think we need to up them back up, make sure people stick to the standards. We've seen, Neil Parish rightfully resign for breaking the moral code, but would a 50-50 split of men and women improve things? I don't think so. I think that's the Tory party slipping into identity politics. That's the Tory party being woke and saying, yeah, the best way to do this is a quota. You rightly said quotas don't work. They breed resentment, and also they don't really breed top quality. But to suggest that, the Tory party said half our MPs will be women, as if that's to say that will cut out all the sleaze. The latest sleaze scandal is Angela Rayner flashing herself to the Prime Minister. She is a woman. It's not a case of only men can be sleaze bags. Anyone can be. It's a case of the Houses of Parliament is a den of degeneracy, and they need to improve the standards across the board.
Well, it's true, but obviously Angela Rayner isn't a sleaze bag. We're just to put that out there. But yeah, I hear
Who's not a sleaze bag?
I don't think
I think flashing yourself at the Prime Minister on purpose is quite sleaze bag.
She sort of implied that she was aware of it in the podcast. So she has.
She said, this is what I do to distract the Prime Minister.
Well, look, you could interpret it that way, but either way, I probably wouldn't call that a sleaze bag.
Sorry, my words, not yours.
I would probably call that the power of a woman, actually. All done in the best possible taste.
It's utter degeneracy. It's distasteful.
I don't think so. I think women use all sorts of wiles to get what they want.
You don't think it's distasteful to flash yourself?
No, I don't think. No. Flashing yourself full stop isn't right. But if you're wearing things to sort of make your life a bit more better, then I don't really think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because women use lots of different guises to empower themselves. So
a lot of people made it about women. It wasn't about women. It's nothing to do with women. It's about having high moral standards. It's about setting a good example. If Boris Johnson turned up with really, really short shorts, flashing himself to the opposing belt, I would have said that was wrong too. And what I hated about this whole debate was everyone was going, oh, this is sexist, it's misogynistic, you're criticising women. Like, no, you can criticise a woman if you think she's doing something wrong. That doesn't make you a misogynistic person, just as you can, like we've always argued, you can criticise people like Meghan Markle for being wrong without that being racist. It's like people just look at the immutable characteristics and say, you are ist, you are ism, and then it defeats the whole argument.
Well, and I also think that if you are using the power of a woman in that you're using an element of your sexuality to, get things done, then I don't think you can start complaining about misogyny either. Danny, your view?
Isn't it funny? Last week, everyone was saying, whoever leaked the story, that the focus on her doing the, what was the movie called? Basic Instinct. It was Sharon Stone. It was misogynistic. And last week, everyone was saying how misogynistic it was. Yet the story stemmed from her within 7 days. And now, Nana, I love you. Now you're saying it's the power of a woman.
No, I said that in my...
But last week we were saying how misogynistic it was.
In my monologue, I was actually saying the very opposite. That was what my monologue was about, is that you can't then call it misogyny if you are using the power of a woman. And I said, good on her, actually. If you're using the power of a woman, fair enough. But once you're using that, then don't call that, can't call people misogynists. It's not fair. So that's what I was saying, Danny.
OK, well,
my tweet from last week said this is not about sexism.
No.
That wasn't... I think, and actually...
I retract that
I think
comment.
the misogyny was a distraction from the fact that it had stemmed initially from her as well, which is why I wasn't happy with that.
Anyway, look, let's get back to the meritocracy of 50-50 split with women MPs. I think that if you're a constituent, you want your MP to do his or her best in order to make your life better. Now, the fact that he's a bloke, OK, well, that's great. He does his job well. The fact that she's a woman, well, that's fine. But as soon as you start quotas, I know this from the BBC. 5 years ago, that Tony Hall said there's got to be a 50-50 split for female and male breakfast show presenters. There's got to be. And the figures plummeted because of box-ticking quotas. Now, I'm not saying that it's mutually exclusive for a woman not to be able to present a great breakfast show. I'm not saying that for a second. But it should be on merit.
Well, and I agree with that. It should actually be on merit. That's why I'm slightly uncomfortable with quotas, because often you end up with people being there just because they're black, and then when somebody who is talented comes along, who is black, they don't get the space because they filled their quota. And I found that actually going through myself in TV, that there were times where, certain organisations wouldn't take me because they already had their one black female, or they had their one this. So for me, how do they know? Actually, it could be that 75% of the House could end up being female, and actually there could be more women than... So what worries me about quotas, and I'm glad that people are looking at the sort of imbalance and addressing it and trying to open their eyes to the imbalance, but I don't think that quota is actually the way forward. I wonder if anyone...
The Tories are really bad for this. They've got women to win, Parliament 50-50. They've got all these campaign groups that are saying we need this exact amount of women in the Houses of Parliament, and that is a nonsense because it's all based on quotas. It's not based on meritocracy. You can't say we are the party of equality, of opportunity and meritocracy, and then at the same time promote affirmative action and arguments of the left. It doesn't work like that.
That does seem to be the way. And actually, there are other things that could improve Parliament as well, but we'll discuss more about that. Let's find out what our Great British Voice is saying, because this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome on our Great British Voice, their opportunity to tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing in a day. It's Oliver Hodgson. He's from the Lake District, and let's go over to there and find out what he thinks. Oliver, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. So what do you think, then? What would make Parliament better in your view?
Well, Nana, I can remember a few years ago, I spent a couple of weeks in Parliament with my local MP, who's a female, and she's a fantastic member of Parliament up here in the Lake District. And actually, it was about 3 years ago now. It's such less of a toxic place than it is now. And I think what would make it better is very simple. It is about setting an example. The young people in schools, at university studying politics, all they see now is catfights and a pantomime. These last few months have been nothing short of a circus. How can that encourage anybody who wants to go into politics to make the world a better place, right? All you're going in to do is sit and debate and lower yourself to these ridiculous arguments that have been going on recently. And I think the world of politics, globally is changing. It is becoming a bit of an ego trip for a lot of these MPs rather than, actual change. And also it would be nice to see MPs who are a bit more in touch with the nation. Obviously, the recent scandals around Rishi Sunak, which we debated the other week. I think it's time for MPs to be on the ground and be nuanced with people, regardless of what political party they affiliate with. But also, as I said, going back to that, it is about, cutting this catfighting out, cutting the bitching out, cutting all of the, the drama and the frivolities that is Parliament at the minute.
What do you think? Really? Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, yes, it is. Thank you so much, Oliver. You're I would say absolutely spot on. Obviously, we apologise if anyone was offended by the comment there. But thank you very much, Oliver. Much appreciated. Lovely to talk to you. As Oliver, I think he was very eloquent. I think he made a very good point. And, something that he mentioned when he mentioned the pantomime element, I suddenly remembered Brexit. And remember how we were watching the way they were trying to do little pacts so that they could try and vote, get their pact enough to sort of break the democratic agreement that we've had with them, and it was an embarrassment to the rest of the world. You saw eye to the right, eye to the left. What they're saying isn't even real English. It's not even real speak. It's not the way we speak in general. They've got all this sort of parliamentary jargon,
But this pact might be happening again. It seems that Labour and the Lib Dems have a pact for this local election.
Yeah, they're trying to do
They're
that.
stepping down in certain places to win.
Yeah.
It's outrageous that they're not telling the constituents that.
Well, they're disturbing the democratic balance.
Of course they are.
It's not acceptable.
Slight irony as well. The guy perving at his phone, looking for tractors and then coming across an X-rated movie site. He was chair of the Parliamentary Select Committee at one point as well. So he's a guy who brings people in to hold them to account and to ensure that integrity is sacrosanct. And then it just goes to show the double standards.
Yeah, but to his credit, when he was out, when it came out that he had done that, and by all, I can see he doesn't sound like he's a sort of predatory type character that people have all been complaining about. This sounds like these are a moment of madness after the first time. May well have been an accident. Sounds like a moment of madness that he did that, and then obviously I would say with a lot of integrity he stepped back because
you can't give him credit for admitting that he watched porn in the lower chamber.
I'm not giving him credit.
The story. Well, you said that he deserves credit for, and he's full of integrity.
Well,
the story's
integrity
about
for stepping down without being pushed.
Well, I think the story's not about him stepping down. I think the story's about a chair of the Parliamentary Select Committee watching X-rated movies. And then the next breath holding people to account. The double standards of it.
Well, yes, but once he's been seen to do this...
So he got caught and he stepped down, so what?
I don't even... for me personally, I think the punishment should have been different. But
it's good that he stepped down, because that's the thing to do, the right thing to do, and so many of them wouldn't do that anymore.
That's right.
And you're right that he has, showing his hypocrisy, full of double standards in the House, but the easiest solution to this is ban electronic devices from the chamber.
Well,
they should not be sat there on their mobile phones. And they're there to represent us. We are paying them a lot of money to be there. Get your phone away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, today I'm asking what would make Parliament better. Let's see what you've been saying with your views. Jean says double the pay, severely reduce expenses and put stringent selection processes in place for all parties. In short, get people up to the job. Katrina says an impartial common speaker for starters. Gosh, yeah, do you remember? What's his name? Burko. He was horrendous. David says... 1, being moved to an industrial estate in the Midlands. 2, being populated by MPs who care about their constituents' needs. I think that's a very good point. Alan says, let's just not beat ourselves up about this. Parliament has pretty much stood the test of time. And Andy says, if all elected MPs would grow up, get a backbone and get on with doing what they were elected by constituents to do. Yes, there is that too. Yes, thank you so much for your thoughts. Keep all of those coming. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, it's time for World View. Alan Mendoza from the Foreign Policy and National Security think tank, the Henry Jackson Society, will join me. On the agenda, the latest in Ukraine, as attempts are made to evacuate civilians trapped in a steelworks in Mariupol, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claiming that Russia has lost more than 23,000 soldiers so far in the invasion of its country. But first, let's get you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy with limited sunshine and outbreaks of rain in the west and southwest. Let's take a look at the details. It'll be a cloudy evening across southwest England with patchy outbreaks of rain. The rain heaviest in the north and over the moors, although some brighter spells are possible too. The southeast of England will be mostly cloudy too, but it'll be drier in general. A little light rain is possible for a time. It'll be a rather damp end to the day for southern Wales, a mostly cloudy picture with outbreaks of showery rain, especially in the west. The cloudy theme to the weather continues across the Midlands this Sunday evening. A little patchy, mostly light rain is possible at times, but most places will remain dry with some bright spells. There'll be a brighter end to the day for northeast England with some sunny spells likely here this evening. The odd shower is also possible, but remaining mostly dry for most. It will be a similar story for southern Scotland this evening. Some sunny spells are likely, and although most places will be dry, the odd isolated shower is possible. Some bright or sunny spells are also likely across Northern Ireland this evening after a cloudy, damp day. Mostly dry with just an isolated shower likely, mainly in the north. Rain clearing south overnight, but remaining rather cloudy with some mist and fog patches developing, especially in the west. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GBNews.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 5 minutes to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's now time for Worldview. Now, that is the part of the show where we look at what's making the headlines across the globe. And today, once again, the focus is on Ukraine as efforts continue to evacuate civilians from the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol. Now, Russia says that 46 civilians have been evacuated from the vicinity of the Azovstal steel plant. And I'm joined now by Alan Mendoza. He's the Chief Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, a national security think tank. Alan, let's start with the evacuation efforts in Mariupol. How difficult has this been? Because they're saying, it's getting worse. I mean, what is going on there?
Well, Putin, if you remember, promised that he would sort of seal Mariupol so tight that not even a fly could get out. Now, he's somewhat changed his tune. We've been seeing today there have been evacuation efforts under the UN. Now, some of them appear to be being evacuated to Russia. The numbers you were talking about earlier have gone to Russia in that regard. Ukraine also says a group of about 100 are supposed to be heading out further north there. So clearly there is some evacuation happening. We've got to hope it continues, because this city, which was a city of 440,000 people, is now down to about 100,000. It's been flattened. So to live there, God only knows how they're surviving. And
it's worrying because the people have been taken, they're saying about about 1 million people have been taken from the areas around Ukraine and then dispersed to different parts of Russia. And do we know how these people have been treated or where they're going? Do we have any reports of what's actually happening to those people once they've been taken from parts of Ukraine?
Well, there are reports. I mean, in some cases we're discovering that they're being put to work as labourers in that case. In other cases they've been left alone. But clearly these Ukrainian citizens, in most cases, will not want to be in Russia. They'll want to be out back towards Western places rather than there. So God knows how we get them out.
Now, obviously, we were talking about the ruble to ruble. Putin insisted that countries pay via rubles, and now parts of Ukraine are using rubles. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on there.
Well, yes, exactly. I mean, today we learned that Kherson, the occupied city of Kherson, the Russians have announced that the ruble will henceforth be the currency that is in operation. So basically, they're looking to assimilate these territories into Russia. It's quite a big step, obviously. You're using our currency, not your own. And equally, of course, internationally, he's demanding the use of the ruble to buy gas, because that will, of course, help bolster the ruble, and he can get hold of the money, as opposed to if it's given in euros or dollars, where sanctions might bite and he might not be able to get it. So, unfortunately, we are helping his war effort by paying in rubles.
But haven't Poland and a few others refused to comply?
Yes, some have been brave and gone, no, we're not doing this, we're not going to pay in the ruble. Others, though, German companies, Italian companies, have said we will actually set up accounts in that way. So very disturbing reports all round.
Now, of course, moving across to America, Nancy Pelosi, she's talking about supporting the war effort even more. She's apparently going to have a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. Give us a bit more detail on that.
Well, you'll recall that President Biden announced that he would like to give $33 billion of aid to Ukraine. There'll be all sorts of different kinds of aid. And she's gone with a congressional delegation, being, of course, the Speaker of the House, to try and bolster that, because, of course, to get this money out, Congress will have to sort of be a part of it as well. So I think she's demonstrating there is interest in Congress to support it. I'm sure there'll be Republicans who'll be supportive as well. This seems to be, on the whole, an issue that is bipartisan in nature. So I would hope that the Ukrainians will get the aid they need. They desperately need.
So where are the Ukrainians in this war at the moment? We've got reports that 25,000 Russian troops have apparently been killed. Where are the Ukrainians in this now? How are the bombs dropping now all across the Black Sea area? I mean, what is the progress now in terms of...
What we've got at the moment is a bit of a hiatus, in the sense that the Russians are not engaging in a major offence of the type you saw earlier in the war. But what we know they're doing is regrouping in the east of Ukraine, ready to smash out anytime soon. Now, there are localised attacks going on, and we can see, as you've said, shelling and missiles occurring at various different places. Ukrainians believe they've had to adopt the missile approach because so many Russian troops have been killed that they can't really do the ground offensive in the way they used to. Now, whether that's true or not, we'll find out. But it is interesting to see how the tactics have changed.
Because there's been murmurs about nuclear and things like that, but they made the threat, but they've gone a little bit quiet on that front.
Well, those will be down the line. Putin this week did say, anyone who intervenes, you will feel our force in ways you didn't believe would be possible. So that the threat is always there. I suspect, though, that what we're going to see is one big Russian push in the east to coincide with the Victory Day, this sort of great celebration at the end of the Second World War that happens on May the 9th. And Putin will judge how he's doing at that point, and maybe he'll declare victory, or maybe, if he's losing, he may well go for more aggressive weapons of the kind that you mentioned.
Well, it's all a bit worrying, isn't it? We'll obviously stay close to that. Alan, thank you so much for all of that. That's Alan Mendoza. He's, of course, the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Well, if you've just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. So it's fast approaching 5 o'clock, and in that hour, I'm joined by my panel. We'll be talking about all those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. Please stay with us. Also, keep your thoughts coming on all the topics we're discussing. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not send us a tweet at gbnews. And don't forget, you can download the GB News app, where you can keep yourself up to date on all the things that are happening throughout the programme. Now, we'll be discussing lots to do with immigration. Coming up, I've got my Friday Focus at 5, where I'll be talking to someone who's had an extremely interesting career and take a look at life on the outside. We're looking at immigration this time, as reports have come in that, in fact, another boat has come through to our shores. Stay tuned, but first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. It's 5 o'clock. The top stories this hour. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says 100 people have now been evacuated from the southern port city of Mariupol in Ukraine. That comes after the United Nations said efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from a steel plant where people have taken shelter. A spokesperson for the UN said Operation Safe Passage is currently being coordinated between Kyiv and Moscow. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Russia's attacks in the east of his country are continuing.
The occupiers are gathering additional forces for new attacks against our military in the east of the country. Russia has brought reinforcements in the Kharkiv region, trying to increase pressure in the Donbas. They've lost more than 23,000 soldiers in the battles of this senseless war, but they do not stop.
Meanwhile here, hundreds of people on board multiple small boats have today been intercepted in the English Channel by the UK authorities. It follows 11 days in which no small boats crossed into UK waters. Since early this morning, at least 7 vessels have been spotted and intercepted. Around 230 people have been taken to the UK Border Forces Processing Centre in Dover. A series of bullying and sexual misconduct allegations involving MPs in Parliament has seen many women working in Westminster coming forward with stories of harassment. Commons Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle is today calling for radical reform to make the House safer and more inclusive. That comes after the MP Neil Parish resigned after getting caught watching pornography in the House of Commons chamber. Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat, says the problem is bigger than Westminster.
You know, I don't think you need to be told what you could and couldn't look at on your mobile phone in a workplace, Alistair. I mean, you know, you're a grown-up, you know the basic rules of society. I don't think it's that hard. And I just think we need to be a little bit more respectful to each other and just remember that in the whole of society, I'm afraid misogyny is still far too much of an issue and we need to address it together.
Well, the Tory party chairman, Oliver Dowden, says the Conservatives will ensure its candidate list becomes more representative. He told the Sunday Telegraph newspaper that the party should reflect the fact that half the population is female. Around a quarter of Tory candidates at the 2019 election were women, but Labour managed to put forward more than half on their list. The Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says ensuring a majority of women in Parliament could help tackle Westminster sleaze. Now, the May Day marches are getting underway in London today. Members of the public have joined trade union members calling for help for workers struggling to manage with the cost of living crisis. The TUEC says workers need stronger wage bargaining rights and it's calling on the government to introduce an emergency budget to give direct support to people with rising bills. And interest rates are expected to be increased on Thursday to their highest level for 13 years. Economists are predicting the Bank of England will raise interest rates from 0.75% to 1%. That's a number not seen since early 2009. Members of the bank's Monetary Policy Committee have raised rates each of its past 3 meetings as part of attempts to rein in record inflation. But it comes as the war in Ukraine adds to the ongoing cost of living crisis. The Business Secretary has written to North Sea oil and gas companies asking them to come forward with a plan to increase domestic production. Kwasi Kwarteng says the industry must invest in homegrown energy production to boost the British economy and bring down consumer bills in the long term. He said firms must also set out plans for investment in clean energy ahead of a meeting in the coming weeks. 7 people have been rescued and pulled from the debris of an 8-storey block in China. That comes after the residential building in Changsha City collapsed. Firefighters have now been searching for survivors for 52 hours. Chinese police are saying 9 people have been arrested following the building's collapse. That's it. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Now more from Nana Akua.
So it's just gone 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Joining me today is Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Still to come. In a few moments' time, I'll be joined by someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job in my feature Outside. And today, I'll be speaking to the former Director General of the UK Border Force, Tony Smith. He'll be giving me his reaction to the hundreds of people in small boats being intercepted in the English Channel this morning and the deal with Rwanda. The great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? The father of James Bulger has asked why one of his killers has been granted lifelong anonymity after being caught with indecent images of children. Despite being denied parole in 2020, Venables is now hoping to be granted freedom in a matter of weeks. So I want to ask whether any criminal given a life sentence should have to spend the rest of their life behind bars. Let me know your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or why not send me a tweet at gbnews. So it is time for Outside, and today I'm talking to a former director of the UK Border Force. GB News can confirm that hundreds of people on board a number of small boats have been intercepted in the English Channel by UK authorities today. That's after 11 days without any crossings, actually, I might add. The first dinghy was spotted and intercepted in the early hours of this morning. Those on board were taken by a lifeboat to Dover Harbour. So today I'm speaking to Tony Smith Cbe, someone who's spent his entire life protecting the integrity of the UK's borders. He served as the director of the UK Border Force, Gold Commander for the London 2012 Olympic programme, and he's been head of ports and border management for Canada. He's now using his expertise in the private sector, working as a global border security consultant. I'm pleased to say Tony joins me. Good afternoon, Tony. I want to really talk to you, just get straight in on this whole thing, because you became involved in working in the UK Border Force. There's been a lot of talk over the weather and the reason why these crossings have not been coming. What is your view on the Rwanda deal?
Yes, well, good afternoon. I think first thing to say is this is a very bold step by the government. The new Nationality and Borders Bill, or Act as it is now, passed last week. And the Rwanda deal is a very novel, probably a unique one, which has been designed to enable us to send people who come across the UK illegally, either in migrant small boats or in lorries, to Rwanda, where they would not return to the UK. They would actually stay there, whether or not they qualify for asylum. And I think this has really been prompted, hasn't it, by the problems we've seen in the last couple of years of people risking their lives to get across the English Channel from France. So I do think it's a very bold step by the government, but I think there's going to be some problems ahead because, nowadays immigration and asylum law is hugely complicated. So even though we have a new statute on the books now, I have no doubt that there will be a legal challenge the moment that the Home Office tries to put anybody on a plane to Rwanda.
I thought as part of the Nationality and Borders Bill there was something in there that sort of, there would be sort of a penalty for those who are the lawyers and people who try to continue to use the law and perpetuate the situation of people who have come across in that way. So therefore there is some sort of, they won't be able to continue to keep using legal challenges in this way. I think that's one of the things that the Act actually allows us to do. But in terms of the actual crossings themselves, do you think that the plan itself is actually, you called it bold, do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I think the government had to do something because, we had 27 drownings, didn't we, in November? The numbers last year were 28,000 and many people are predicting a fourfold increase. Now, I was in the Home Office, as you said, in the Border Force for a great many years in its various manifestations. The previous record was 20 years ago in 2002 when we had over 100,000 asylum seekers arriving from France. They were then coming more on ferries and so we introduced a number of measures to stop that route and to reduce the intake because frankly the Home Office was completely overwhelmed, as were the social services in Kent, and essentially there was a perceived need actually because people were coming from a safe third country that we needed an agreement with France that we couldn't allow numbers to continue to go up. But what's happened, this migrant crossing route has only been relatively new. Since I've retired, 2 or 3 years now, the migrants are taking more desperate measures. But I think the government had to do something, didn't it? Because if it doesn't do anything, the numbers are going to keep going up. Yeah. People are going to flock to northern France. The migrant smugglers will make more and more money. And, our immigration asylum system is already broken. The Home Secretary has admitted that. And we want to do things, don't we, for people from places like, Ukraine and and Syria, and people genuinely fearing persecution. So I think the Act distinguishes people coming from safe third countries like France, who may well have been there for some considerable time and could quite easily have claimed asylum there, but chose not to because they'd rather come to the UK. And so, well, actually, that's not a way to run the business. That's, we welcome refugees, but you're not really immediately fleeing persecution, are you? And you're playing into the hands of human smugglers. So our only route out, we can't send you back to France because they won't have you back. We can't send you back to your own country. Many of these countries, won't take them back anyway, whether or not they qualify for asylum. They won't allow their own nationals to come back again. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, the only option is to find some other place which is safe and secure where people could have new lives if that's what they want to do. And I think that's why the Rwanda partnership is a really, really bold initiative by the government. But as I say, a number of people, I'm sure, will now say, oh, well, that's not a safe place. You can't do that. It's unreasonable. It's unfair. And we will see increased legal challenges, even though the government has just passed a new law in Parliament to enable them to do exactly that.
Do you think that these first sort of few hundred people are a bit of a test? Because we don't have that many places in Rwanda. So once the first 200 have been processed, we're kind of stuck, aren't we? So do you think that this is potentially a test by the people to see what happens to these people? Because, I mean, if I was coming across, I wouldn't want to be one of the first lot to try this. What do you think?
Well, I think you're right to put yourself in the mind of the migrant and of the smuggler. And what would you do if if the advice that you're getting, if all the communications that you're getting is actually, this is all a bit of a bluff, really? You could still get in the boat, you could still get to the UK, and they'll still let you stay, regardless of this Rwanda thing. You're going to keep coming. But if you actually believe that there's a realistic possibility that you will end up in Rwanda, that will be your option, then you might think twice about it. So I think the government has to do this. It has to demonstrate it has the capability to move people onto Rwanda, and that message needs to get across loud and clear to the migrants and the smuggling gangs in France that you can't do this anymore and break this business model. And so I think there's a long way to go yet, but I do think it's possible. And I think a lot of questions are going to be asked now about whether or not Rwanda is safe, but there's a lot of commentary about that, one way or another. The UN High Commissioner on Refugees has said it is. The World Travel Tourism Council said people are going to visit Rwanda. It's a top tourism spot. There's been a lot of progress there in recent years, is what the government is saying. Of course, there will be others who will say, we can't possibly think about sending people to Rwanda. It's a dreadful, terrible place. So I think the investigations will come through now. But I do think the government are on the right lines, because we have to stop the boats, and nobody yet has given me another alternative about how we're going to stop the boats if we can't get the French or the EU to agree to take them back.
Well, that is the point, isn't it? We can't send the boats back because people are complaining about that. People are actually complaining about the fact that they're looking to sort of commandeer some old ex-army bases as well. They don't want them in there next door to where they live. So it is a difficult issue, and actually I think we'll see what happens and see whether these ones are a test. Let's come back a bit to your role in 2012, because of course you played an important role at the Olympics. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so London 2012 was obviously massive for the UK border, because that wasn't just about immigration, that was about security as well. And if you remember, we had a number of incidents between 2001, 9/11 and 2005 of terrorism. And if you know your history of the Olympics, it is a target for terrorists. And so a lot of that was about securing our border and making sure that of all the many, many hundreds of thousands of people that were coming to the games from around the world, which of course we welcomed, there weren't any bad apples in there that could cause us, serious damage or serious harm. So I worked very closely with other parts of the Home Office. My job was to make sure that, everybody was accredited. So if you applied for a pass to get into the country and into the games, that we did some checks on you. And we kept an eye on those people that we thought might be a risk. And if we thought you were a risk, we wouldn't let you come, because we didn't want anyone to spoil our games. And it went really, really well. I was really pleased with the outcome, because we had a most fantastic year that year. We were able to secure the border, but border security is quite tricky, because people will always complain about something. We can't hold people too long at the airport, because then they'll complain that they're waiting too long. But if we let someone through who does something dreadful, that's your fault as well. And so you've got to try and find that balance between facilitation and control. But I thought we did that really, really well in London 2012, and I was very proud of our country and what we did then. And I think we were able to show that actually we have got a really, really good border. And I still stand up for the Border Force. I've been out there for a little while now, but I sympathise with the officers. They don't have an easy job. No one ever says thank you to them for what they do. It's usually they've done something wrong, isn't it, somewhere? And so, I will stand up for them, and I will talk to, people like yourselves about what I think. The government, I've never ever worked for a government that advocated open borders in 50 years. Everybody, of different colours, red, yellow, blue. Everybody said we need a border control of some sort. I mean, if you don't want a border control at all, well, let the public speak and say, let's vote for a party that has open borders and anyone can come and live here. But I've never known that in the last 50 years, and I just don't think it's realistic.
Well, it isn't realistic, and literally every country has a border, and the countries have border walls and everything else like that, and there is reason for that. Now, finally, because we're going to move on, but I want to ask you, if you could give the government one thing, because I know you work as a security consultant, to the public sector. If you could give the government one thing that you feel that they could do, which would help them in their sort of goal to try and improve their border strategy, what would that thing be?
Work together across departments. Don't fight with each other. Don't have turf wars about whether it should be the military or whether it should be the border force or whether this department should be doing that. But what we need is something called integrated border management. That's what we did on the Olympics. So I had, lots and lots of people on my mobile phone who were from the military, from the police, from other departments, customs. It's really important that government joins up because we've got some fantastic assets in this country. I'm pleased we did bring the military, and they've got some fantastic assets. But, we sometimes I think we get bogged down a little bit in silos, and it's the border force, or it's the asylum directorate, or it's somebody else. I think if we pull together and all of the departments work together behind a common policy, then I think we've got a good chance of delivering what this government wants. But that to me is my advice. They need to work in collaboration, not just with one another, but of course with other countries as well.
OK, well, listen, Tony, thank you so much. It's really good to talk to you. That's Tony Smith Cbe. He's the former Director General for UK Border Force. He says work together. I think he's making perfect sense, and I'm interested to hear the thoughts of my panel as well on the news of the migrant crossing. Joining me today is Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. So what do you think? I'm going to start with you, Danny, briefly. It's been 11 days. We had no crossings, and suddenly hundreds of people have come across in some little dinghies again.
It was great to hear a guy who spent his professional life trying to keep control of our borders actually advocating and endorsing the Rwanda Plan, because there is no other option. The options we have are to either deter in this instance, or just we need to get used to the fact that every single year, demographically, our country is going to change, and we need to either accept that with an open borders policy, or we need to do something about it. Now, that this guy who is at the cold face of things, the gritty reality of trying to keep our borders safe, is advocating and endorsing the Rwanda Plan, which is music to a lot of people's ears, because it is unstoppable. We have waves and waves of people who are successfully making these trips. They know once they get to the English side of the English Channel, they'll be picked up, and they know that they'll be
assimilated into society in this country without much.
And look, I feel we may fall out a little bit. I feel desperately sorry for these people. Some of them,
Why do you think we'd fall out because of that?
Well, because I haven't finished what I was about to say.
OK. There's still time.
There's still time. Because if I was an immigrant, an economic migrant, and my family was in Birmingham, I would want to make sure that I was in Birmingham with them. And it's those solitary individuals that I feel great empathy and sympathy for. I don't have any sympathy or empathy for these young men who are travelling by themselves, and I'm assuming they're not going to meet up with their mum and dad, because the majority of people are young men. So their mum and dad aren't in Birmingham. So that's who I feel a bit of sympathy to.
Calvin.
I think we've not just been allowing illegal immigrants across the channel, we've been encouraging them by, like you said, picking them up halfway and bringing them over, say, hey, come on over. That's encouraging the illegal people smuggling industry, that's encouraging crime, death, and it's a bad thing. So I think the Rwanda Plan will solve a lot of that, because it might be a deterrent. It might say, actually, we don't want to risk it going over from a safe country of France into the United Kingdom if we're going to get shipped off somewhere else to be processed, and we might not be allowed back into the UK. So we're better off staying in France.
I remember when I sort of first said, that either send the boats back or, do something about it. When I said that, people said, well, what about you and your family, if they'd done that to your family? May I just say to anybody who said that to me, I can tell you now that my parents actually came through the actual visa route. So they had to jump through hoops hoops. Had to have enough money, had to have something in. They came to the official visa route to get here. So just so if anyone wants to chuck that in at me again, I'll just let them know that actually, no, my parents didn't come on a boat or as a refugee or anything like that. There are actually many people who are very skilled who go through the actual route of getting into this country, and they do it that way. And I think it's very unfair that people coming through boats would take up the numbers against people like that.
Between immigration and illegal immigration.
Exactly, and that's what I see.
I think we've just taken in 100,000 from Hong Kong as well.
Well, that's great.
We've welcomed them.
That's wonderful.
Welcomed them.
Well, that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. So just right. So let's see. Coming up, we've got the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? A paroles report found that one of the killers of James Belcher, John Venables, is now hoping to be granted freedom in a matter of weeks. So I'm asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? Send me your thoughts. GBviews at gbnews.uk, or tell me what you think by sending me a tweet at GBnews. And there is a poll up asking that question right now. Should a life sentence mean life behind bars? Please cast your vote now. We'll be back in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So it's fast approaching 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. I'm joined by my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Right before the break, we were discussing the news that hundreds of people have been stopped today crossing the English Channel on small boats. Now, it follows no crossings for 11 days since the Rwanda deal was announced, but many experts suggest that the lack of crossings were down to strong winds rather than the deal itself. Now, let's see what you've been saying. Jill says Rwanda deportation is clearly not going to work. Hundreds are still crossing the Channel, and I could probably count on one hand how many are being deported, most likely because of legal cases. Potentially, but we do have the Nationality and Borders Bill, so that does slightly change. It's an act now, actually, as it goes. Willie says we have no idea if the Rwanda deal is working at the moment. We won't know until in just a few weeks' time over the period when the weather is good for crossings. Or if, of course, the government do what they say they're going to do, because that might then put people off. Tom says that the Rwanda deal won't work because it doesn't actually tackle the problem, people smugglers. And Les says part of the problem of migration via the Channel is that the Border Force are providing a taxi service, and this should be stopped. Yeah, some people would say that's not very nice though. You need to, if people are drowning, you do need to rescue people. We can't allow people to die in that manner. Unfortunately, that can't be the way. We can't be going that way. Right, so it's time now for our Great British debate this hour, and I'm asking: should a life sentence mean life behind bars? Ralph Bulger, the father of the 2-year-old baby James, who was killed by two 10-year-old boys back in 1993. Awful story back then. Has questioned why one of the killers continues to be granted lifelong anonymity. Despite being denied parole in 2020, John Venables is now hoping to be granted freedom in a matter of weeks. He was jailed for life, but released on licence with a new identity in 2001. Why are we paying for these people, honestly? But now the 36-year-old, and he's only 36, bear this in mind, so he has got his life still well ahead of him. He was sent back to prison in 2010 and 2017 for possessing indecent images of children. So I'm asking, is our justice system a light touch? And if someone is sentenced to life in prison, should they spend their entire life behind bars? Well, I'm joined now by Chris Dorr QC, who's a barrister and the author of Justice on Trial. Chris, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. So just to clarify, because a lot of people hear a life sentence and they think it means someone will spend their entire life behind bars. What does it actually mean in a court of law?
Well, a life sentence means that you will be subject to the sentence of the court for the rest of your life. Some of the life sentence is spent in prison, and the judge sets the minimum amount of time that you will spend in prison. When you reach that point, you can apply for parole, but you won't get parole unless the parole board decides that you are safe to be released and that you no longer represent a danger to the public. But after you're released, you still remain subject to that life sentence. You can have your movement controlled. You can have all manner of different conditions on where you must live, reporting to the probation service, and a whole range of other activities that you can be prohibited from doing. For example, in this case, you could be prohibited from having unsupervised contact with children, and a whole range of other protective measures. And if you breach the terms of your licence, as happened in the past with John Venables, I think on more than one occasion, you can be returned to prison under that life sentence. And indeed, in theory at least, you could end up being recalled and remaining in prison until you die.
Well, but all at the expense of the taxpayer, of course. You're coming in and out and in and out, and you're doing things, and we put them back in, and then we bring them back out again. And to me, it just seems there were just 61 criminals serving whole life orders at the end of 2021. So there is a thing where you serve a whole life order, but can that mean that whole life in prison, actually in prison, or does that still mean that you are whole life orders that throughout your life you can go back if you breach the conditions with which you're allowed to be out?
No, a whole life order, it means that you'll never be released, and that's reserved for the most serious and shocking crimes. For example, the killer of Lee Rigby and a number of other very high-profile cases in recent times have received whole life orders, and they've become a lot more common. They're set to become even more common, and we are on the trajectory. We're at the very beginning of that trajectory, but we're on the trajectory towards the United States system, where they have 60,000 people serving life without the possibility of parole. And for me, that will be a catastrophic mistake.
Why? Why is that a bad idea? If somebody gets a whole life sentence, or it might even reduce the propensity for someone to commit that crime if they thought that they could be in prison for the rest of their life. A lot of prisoners are coming in and out of prison consistently, and especially if they're doing awful things but aren't as bad, then we're wasting money, taxpayers' money, in a sense, bringing them out, putting all the security. For example, Venables will, once he comes out, new identity, will need to be protected all his life because of his crimes, and will have to be monitored constantly. Whereas if he were in prison, then that would be fine. He can stay there. I'm just disappointed there isn't actually a death penalty. That's where I would go with this. But if they are, I don't see why they should even be let out at all if they've committed such heinous crimes.
You'd give a death penalty to a 10-year-old?
Not a 10... Well, but I'd give, for somebody, as a killer, potentially, not as if you're a 10-year-old, you serve your prison sentence. But I would actually keep them in prison for the rest of their lives.
No, she just said no.
I just said no.
But a moment ago you were arguing that he should have had the death penalty when he was 10.
No, I said we should have the death penalty for the most heinous of crimes, but I would absolutely, if somebody, child killers, there would be a death penalty, but obviously you might have to consider how old that child killer is. And yes, but I wouldn't allow them to come out of prison at all, no. Especially if they've been viewing pornography in terms of child indecent images of children after they've after the sentence. It's not acceptable.
let's just break all of this down, okay? So first of all, you were a moment ago suggesting that it would be cheaper to keep people in prison the whole time rather than them coming out on licence and going back in again. That's just patent nonsense. It costs an absolute...
Well, why is that nonsense? No, I don't think it is.
Because a high-security prison place for a murderer costs anything from £60,000 to £70,000 a year. Keeping someone on probation in the community costs 10% of that. So it's much, much cheaper to have people in the community than it is to keep them in a high-security prison environment. And secondly, your second point about, somehow having the death penalty or having life without parole kind of handed out almost routinely for anyone who commits certain crimes. Well, that's what they do in the United States. That's why they've got 60,000 people serving life without parole. They have the death penalty in many US states. They have 2.5 million people in prison, many of them serving sentences of 100 years or 150 years, even if they haven't got life without parole. And does anyone sitting at home watching this programme think that America's the safest place on earth as a result? Of course it's not. They have the highest level of violent crime on earth. They have vast levels of child murder, child abuse, child rape, and all the other serious crimes that are committed against children, despite the fact that you will often get the death penalty, and you certainly are likely to get life without parole if you commit those crimes. So the idea that you set these sentences and suddenly crime stops is just nonsense.
Well, you may say that, but first of all, the only cost you're measuring is the... Hang on, sorry, I've allowed you to speak. It's my turn now. I listened, I hear what you said, and now I will respond to those points that you made. Now, the first point, you talked about cost. Well, OK, if you only measure cost by money, then you may be partly true, but I'm measuring cost to society. I'm also measuring the cost of the people who that person will then go and affect after being released, and many of those people continue to go on committing the similar crimes, which are unacceptable to the victims, who will therefore never, ever recover from what has happened to them, because many of them may be killed or will have problems mentally because of what's happened to them. Secondly, you talked about life without parole, and I think that absolutely should be an option, because it'll probably mean that less people will go into prison because they might consider that they will never come out. And finally, you talked about America, and you said it's got all these numbers. You quoted some statistics. Do you know how much bigger America is than the UK? It's huge. So you're not comparing like with like. And also, they have the right to bear arms. I absolutely think the death penalty should be considered. And in wake of the killing of this poor 6-year-old Arthur Labin, Joe Hughes as well, the Prime Minister has been talking about backing Arthur's Law, which would actually see people who murder children automatically jailed for their entire lives. And that's what I think should have happened to John Venables. So finally, I want to ask you then, should life sentence mean life behind bars?
No, of course it shouldn't. The idea that we end up having this system, I mean, you talk about America being bigger than us. It's 5 times bigger than us. Their population is 30 or 40 times bigger than ours, because they adopt this ridiculous policy that you're advocating of locking so many people up forever. And what happens is, when you do that, is that no one takes any notice. It doesn't stop people committing crime. It certainly wouldn't stop 10-year-olds going out and doing something seriously violent because of something they saw on the news about someone being sentenced. It's just not how the world works. If you're going to try and reduce crime, you have to stop these simplistic, jingoistic ideas about just getting ever tougher and tougher. We've been doing that for 25 years, and where have we got with it? What good has it done our society? I'll tell you, it's made it worse.
You think we've got tougher and tougher on crime, Chris Dorr QC? I don't think so. Thank you very much for joining me. He's a barrister. Thank you very much for joining me. He's a barrister and author of Justice on Trial. Pleasure to talk to you. Right, you're with me, Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue our great British debate this hour. I'm asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly, and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Some breaking news coming to us within the last half hour. Lancashire police have confirmed that a body found in the forest of Bowland has been identified as Katie Kenyon. The 33-year-old mother of 2 was last seen getting into a Ford Transit van in Burnley on April the 22nd. On Friday, Andrew Burfield, who's 50 years old, appeared by video link from HMP Preston for a brief court hearing charged with the murder of Miss Kenyon. In news away from home, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says around 100 people have now been evacuated from the southern port city of Mariupol. It comes after the United Nations said efforts are underway to evacuate civilians from the steel plant where people have taken shelter. A spokesperson for the UN said Operation Safe Passage is currently being coordinated between Kyiv and Moscow. Meanwhile, President Zelensky says Russia's attacks on the east of his country are continuing. And the US Speaker of the House says America will stand with Ukraine until the war is won against Russia. Nancy Pelosi made the comments after meeting with President Zelensky in Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. She's the highest-ranking US official to visit the country since Russia launched its offensive in February, and she condemned the Russian President Vladimir Putin's diabolic invasion. Here, hundreds of people on board multiple small boats have today been intercepted in the English Channel by UK authorities. It follows 11 days in which no small boats crossed into UK waters. Since early this morning, though, at least 7 vessels were spotted and intercepted and 230 people taken to the UK Border Force's processing centre in Dover. And tributes have been paid to the country singer Naomi Judd, who's died at the age of 76. Her daughters, Ashley and Winona Judd, confirmed in a statement. Judd found fame as part of the country music group The Judds alongside her daughter Winona. Winona and Ashley attributed their mother's death to the disease of mental illness on social media. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Nana Akua is here in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. So back to our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? The murdered child James Bulger's father has questioned why one of his killers has had lifelong anonymity. James, who was just 2 years old, was tortured and killed by the men formerly known as John Venables and Robert Thompson, who were both aged 10, after they snatched him from a shopping centre in Merseyside. It was absolutely horrendous. I remember it very clearly. It was in February 1993. Now, despite being denied parole in 2020, John Venables is now hoping to be granted freedom in a matter of weeks. It's raised fresh questions about the leniency of Britain's justice system and whether some criminals who were given a life sentence should ever be released. Before I speak to my panel, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Aidan says Daw and his like are the major cause of the problem. Prison works. Letting people out of prison is another part of the problem. Mark says, totally agree with Chris. How will more life sentences help us? It'll just fill the prisons up. Nothing wrong with that. Max says there's no point in having a life sentence, which isn't, and life sentences ought to be dished out to people whose crimes are heinous or for people who can never be released. And I would say I would agree with him there. Right, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster Danny Kelly and also Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Now, Danny, should a life sentence mean life?
we're conflating the terrible murder of poor 2-year-old Jamie Bulger, and I remember it so vividly. I'm a Scouser, I was in the Northwest, and we're conflating that with should a whole life sentence mean life. So if I can compartmentalise how I feel about Jamie Bulger's killer, I think he was granted anonymity by the judge because he was only 10 years old. Now, the criminal age of in this country is actually set at 10.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, isn't it? It's one of the lowest ages in the whole of Western Europe. So should he be given lifelong anonymity? OK, well, the judge deemed he could change his name and get the anonymity. Should his perverted child pornography fascination, should that then exclude him from this lifelong anonymity? Well, I don't think it should, because they should be treated separately. Right. Getting on to your question about should a life sentence be a life sentence, I think if someone was to go to prison for murder and they were to be released on a life sentence like the QC explained and then go and murder again, I think there's a good reason to have that debate about, obviously, prison hasn't worked for this lad, but I'm a great believer in rehabilitation. So I'm going to say no.
Well, that's no fun if you're the person that's been murdered after a murderer's come out of prison.
But that doesn't matter.
Easy.
That's not the question.
No, but that is the reasoning. That is the reason behind it. It might not be the question, but, you know, look, if somebody has murdered somebody, and in the case, and Chris Daw did point out the children were 10, OK, so they've given an opportunity. Now, John Venables has gone on and been, you know, looking at child indecent images of children. I would immediately initiate that life sentence and they would be back in prison, especially as an adult now. That I would carry that through. There's no way they would even be getting out again. But, Calvin, what's your view?
My view is that a large part of the problem here is the sneering classes, the metropolitan liberal elites. When we hear from QCs that say, well, of course life shouldn't mean life. It actually means you get this amount of time in prison, this amount of time out on licence, etc. To the average blogs in this country, the average person like us, life should mean life. And when we hear someone's going away for life, we tend to think that means they're going to be locked away for life. And that's not just for rehabilitation, that's also for punishment. And that is for the victims. That's so that they can't be back out on the streets of the UK committing more crimes. And as we keep seeing, these people get let out, they commit another crime, they get sent back in. And people can talk about, oh, we're saving costs by letting them out. That's not acceptable. The cost, like you mentioned, the cost of people's lives is more important. But the QCs are a soft touch, and they seem to be politically activists at the moment. I won't talk about Chris Daw in particular, because he's not here to defend himself, but I don't like to hear QCs saying it's jingoistic to say this and that. No, the vast majority of people in this country want prison to be a deterrent. They want people who commit crimes to be punished for committing those crimes, as well as rehabilitating when possible, but that's not always possible. And to suggest that we've only had 61 life order prison sentences in this country. To suggest that that is somehow on the trajectory to what they have in the United States of 61,000
ridiculous comparison.
is against the evidence. It's just nonsensical. It's showing your political bias.
Well, the other thing is, if you look at countries that do have an incredibly tough regime, so look at places like Dubai and, you know, Saudi Arabia and places like that, you will see that people know that if they commit crimes, they will be punished. Yes. And you see that the crime levels are very low in some of those places. So for him to say that actually, for Chris to say, and I had pointed out that in this country we're getting tougher on crime, I mean, I don't know what he's looking at, but I don't think we are.
You're confusing Sharia law-based...
I'm not confusing Sharia law. I'm confusing...
In Saudi and Dubai, if you get caught stealing, you get your hand cut off.
No, I'm talking about the punishment, right?
Yes, but,
so irrespective of what law it is...
If the punishments are so severe for just shoplifting...
People don't do it.
Of course they don't. But
so if they thought that... No, it's not...
Are you saying that shoplifters should have their hands cut off in the UK?
Listen, I'm not saying that we should apply the same laws. I'm saying that the principle that they're applying is that there is a proper punishment for doing something. If you do something bad, sorry, let me finish. You've asked me a question, I'd like to finish it. I'm not confusing it with Sharia law. What a ridiculous assumption.
No, it's not ridiculous.
No, I think it is. Yes, it is, because I've not mentioned Sharia law. What I'm saying is that if we have stronger punishments, then people won't commit the crimes. Look at places where there are crimes. Strong punishment, you don't have the crimes.
If you do go to jail, you get your PlayStation, your Xbox, your mobile phone, you get to play pool.
Don't get a phone.
You get all the kinds
of... Yes, you get a mobile phone. Some of them do have phones, actually. I'm sorry.
Don't get a mobile phone.
Phones are in prison.
The point is...
It's not a mobile.
The point is, it's, you know, for a lot of people, it's actually a bit of an upgrade. It's actually a decent life. It's not a punishment. It's about rehabilitating them, getting them away from society for a small amount of time. I don't think that's enough. I'm with Nana in that it should be a deterrent. It should be a punishment. It shouldn't just be getting them off the streets. It should be making sure they know what they did is wrong and to prevent other people doing the same thing.
I think if you remove someone's liberty, that's a sufficient punishment.
Well, you might think that, but a lot of them don't seem to. But it's not really a liberty, as Calvin mentioned.
Criminals would say that to you as well.
Yes, but as Calvin...
who spend time behind bars would say the removal of your liberty and being banged up for 23 hours a day with 1 hour exercise is one hell of a punishment.
Well, that's why it should be sustained, shouldn't it, instead of them coming out halfway through it.
But when they're out on licence, their liberty is still removed. They're still wearing tag, or they're still only allowed to go to certain places at certain times. They still don't have their liberties, and it still doesn't work as a deterrent because they're getting sent back to prison for committing more crimes. So I don't think just having your liberty removed is sufficient.
But some prisoners, they get rehabilitated, they go on to live meaningful and fulfilled lives.
Well, yes, but what about the victims?
Yeah.
But you can't let a baying mob
What about baying mob? It's about the victim of the crime.
Okay, but the mob, or sorry, forgive me, the victim of the crime, if they have
you can't
influence...
compare victims to mobs. That's outrageous.
So he's just said the victim.
Okay, I don't think it's outrageous because you're...
He did it on purpose, but the mob, no, I mean the victim.
Okay, let's say the victim. Let him clarify so we can see what he's saying.
First of all, the victims are taken into account in sentencing. They're allowed to have their thoughts read out just before the judge hands down the sentence. So that is taken into account. That is factored in to sentencing. But you need to... Look, if we start giving people more serious sentences because the baying mob, like it was in Liverpool in 1993... By the way, they didn't get life sentences. They got 8 years. So you can't send them back. They didn't get a life sentence. The baying mob actually influenced the court in 1993 because they were tried in an adult court.
But no one here is arguing for the baying mob. I'm talking about the victim of the crime. It's very different.
But why should someone...
They should have justice.
Why should someone who commits the same crime, yet there is a greater feeling of victimhood, why should that person get a stiffer sentence than somebody else where there are no... if you like, family victims?
No, listen, I think they should all... whatever that thing... I'm answering it.
Well, but I ask...
Okay,
answer it. The punishment should fit the crime, absolutely. Yeah. It's not about how much victimhood you have. Yeah. I'm saying if you kill someone, you should get life in prison. It doesn't matter if there's a family left behind or not, but the victims deserve justice, and that justice is a punishment.
But I thought that part of this, what that would influence the sentencing was how the victims felt about it. That's what you said.
Well, no, I said...
Or the family members.
No,
it's justice for the
I didn't say any of that. I never mentioned that at all. You're talking nonsense.
I'm not talking nonsense.
I never talked about... No.
I'm just merely translating what you said.
Well, in your own words, which was not what I said. What I was talking about is that there should be a proper punishment, and that punishment should be properly applied. So if it's a life sentence, you stay in prison for life.
Did you not ask me what about the victims? Did you not ask me what about the victims?
Well, in terms of the victims...
What do you mean by that, then?
I was talking about the cost. We're talking about the financial cost, because Chris Daw was saying...
Victims don't care. If you've had
Hang on. You asked me what about it. I haven't finished. Chris Daw said that he was the cost, the cost is cheaper, and it's cheaper to keep them out than let them in prison. It's more expensive. I'm saying that the cost is wider than just the cost to the person, for us paying for them in prison. It's the cost to the victim,
What does that mean, cost to the victim?
Well, if you lose your father, or the person who's paying the bills for your house, or you lose someone, that's a huge mental cost, that's a huge financial cost. That's not factored into the cost at all.
So it's not about the cost, it's about the mental cost.
No, the cost is a cost.
What I said earlier.
The cost isn't just a monetary cost.
I'm not talking nonsense. I'm merely repeating to you.
I don't know where you're going with this. Let's move on, because this shows nothing without your views. I don't know what he's talking about. Let's welcome our great British voice. This is your opportunity to be on the show. He's putting words in my mouth. Tell us what you really think about the topics we're discussing. Chris Davies is from London. Save us from this. Chris, should a life sentence mean life behind bars?
Hello, Nana. Punchy this afternoon. OK, a whole life sentence is wholly appropriate for certain crimes, and it goes beyond punishment. It's actually retribution. Now, the victim is the dead person. So, yeah, we're talking about murder here. We're talking about Sir David Amess type murder, terrorism, that kind of thing. So where we have a prescribed crime that has a whole life sentence, that is whole life. Now, where I have a real problem with people like Chris Daw, and I'm going to say people like rather than him specifically, I don't like ad hominem attacks either way, against me or with me, but that's fine, is exactly what Calvin described, this sneering metropolitan liberal elite, particularly in the legal profession, where they are frankly leeching off the system at our expense, at taxpayers' expense, in the interests of the criminal. What about the interests of the victim, the dead person, the families left behind, the lives destroyed and ruined? No. It has to stop. We need to be transparent, because what Chris doesn't tell you is there's nothing stopping a judge saying you're going to serve 30 years, you'll serve 2/3 of that. For good behaviour, you'll be out in 20. And yes, you can be recalled if you misbehave again, but there's nothing to stop us changing the system so that you don't call it a life sentence, you call it a 30-year, a 40-year, a 20-year sentence. But a life sentence should mean life. That's it. End of.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very succinct as well, as usual. That is Chris Davies. there in London. Thank you so much. Well, today we've been asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Josh says, well, a life sentence should be capital punishment. Really, I'm with you 100%. Sai says, you don't get a life sentence for a minor crime. Some people need to be put behind bars and be kept there. Absolutely. Again, you see, to me, it's perfectly clear. I don't know why people confuse it. Paul says, not if you're a 10-year-old child, but it's hard to say yes to heinous crimes. Jeff says we should mirror the USA in terms of sentencing laws, and we need a referendum on the death penalty. I'm with you. JT says that if they're that much of a criminal or that little use of society, then why waste money, time and effort on keeping them alive in the first place? Trev says life means life and bring back the death penalty for child murder and barbaric acts of terrorism. There's also right now a poll on Twitter right now asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? Currently, 95% of you say yes, absolutely. 5% of you say no, it shouldn't. So, Danny, there's 95% of the people...
I left school 30 years ago to avoid head teachers like her.
He's just making stuff up that I said. Yeah, 95% say yes.
I'm one of those 95%. I also voted in that poll.
Absolutely, and you're one of the...
I'm one of the 5%. But then I'm an Everton fan. We're at the bottom of the table. I always support the wrong cause.
That is true. I remember that from the COVID era, and then you had COVID and you were saying,
like a cold.
I was right all along.
Well, no, I don't think I said that. Now you're putting words into my mouth.
See, well, Danny, you see, you know what it's like now.
It was like a cold, though.
It was like a cold, yeah.
Right. Well, that's because he's had the vaccine. Right, it's time for Supplement Sunday. It's the part of the show where me and my panel look at some of the other stories that are making the papers today. So if you've just joined me, I'm joined now by broadcaster Danny Kelly, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson. Right, we're going to start with you, Danny, and it's a story about trans women calling 999.
Well, this is just bizarre. Trans women should call 999 if a request to leave a women-only lavatory makes them feel unsafe. I'm sorry, but this is just mind-boggling. You know, someone stop planet Earth from rotating because I want to get off. So basically, you've got a man who identifies as a woman. They go into a female-only safe space. They get asked to leave, maybe, God forbid, somebody asks a bloke to leave a woman's toilet, and then they feel so unsafe they call 999. Now, if you ask Plod, if you ask police, you should only call 999 if there's a crime in process or if there's a threat, an imminent threat to life, OK, or a danger to your physical welfare, not if you are asked to leave a woman's changing space.
Calvin.
That is the soundest thing Danny's ever said. Absolutely spot on, agree with that 100%. I'm blown away.
So am I. Right, let's do the next one then. This one's about how many of us are woke, and it's from Calvin. Calvin.
This is the Observer editorialising. So the British public were polled to find out if we believe that we should be attentive to race and social justice. Of course, the vast majority of people said, yeah, of course we should. So now that the Observer is printing, 4 in 5 Britons believe we should be woke, and that's not the same thing at all. I think most people would say, look, there are racial injustices, there are social injustices, they need addressing, we need to work on them as a society. That's fantastic. But I don't think most people would identify as being woke and going on board with things like critical race theory and critical theory and gender theory and queer theory and all those horrible divisive ideologies that papers like The Observer push. So what they're doing there is they're manipulating data to make the British public look like something that we're not.
Well, it depends on how you interpret the word woke and what your criteria is for someone to become woke as well, if you're doing that. Danny, your view?
Well, yeah, the 4 out of 5, and it was polled by whom? Which paper?
Oh, you know which one.
There you go, then.
Yeah. All right, well, let's do my one, then. There's just a little bit of time for that. A new study revealed that the chemical makeup of your breath changes when you're in a state of sexual arousal. It's true. It's possible that others can pick up on the chemical imbalance, which means it could play a role in dating, kissing and other impassioned interpersonal dynamics. So do you think that this will revolutionise dating?
Now, Nana will vouch for me. Nana, you've seen me before the show swill with Listerine, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Because it's out of courtesy to the person I'm sitting next to. Not because I think I've got terrible bad breath. It's purely out of courtesy. So my breath, and no one's invited to get too close. My breath will smell, hopefully...
As if we could get too close.
My breath will, in the stomach. My breath will smell of Listerine. So I'm not sure about the odour and, you're transmitting chemical...
It's more about chemical imbalance. It might smell of Listerine, but there'll be those hormone changes that may waft this way. What do you think, Calvin?
It sounds like scientific proof of pheromones, and that is an actual thing that people are attracted to or repelled by. I don't know what to make of it, but...
It does sound like pheromones. There are some people's breath that when they speak, you think... would that feeling
would you ever tell someone that they had bad breath?
Absolutely, yes.
Would you?
Oh, I do it all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, I would.
And do you take them to one side? You can't shame them like in...
No, I just go, oh my God!
Would you?
Shut your mouth!
It's a kindness, because people aren't always aware.
No, that's right. But you must do it in a diplomatic and
of course.
benevolent way.
I do everything in a diplomatic and benevolent way.
The complete antithesis of benevolence. Satan personified.
Like, brush your teeth.
Yes.
I think that's cruel to be kind. Sometimes you have to be. It's not being horrible.
No.
Think of how many people that they could infect with that bad breath if I wasn't to tell them about it. Well, anyway, on today's show, I'm ever so kind. On today's show, we've been asking, should a life sentence mean life behind bars? And, well, not much change there, because according to our Twitter poll, 95% of you say yes. I thought we might get 100% of you there, but 5% of you do say no. It's always a pleasure to hear your thoughts. I would say thank you so much to my wonderful panel. Broadcaster Danny Kelly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Oh, well, if invited.
Well,
I always caveat that every Sunday at this time.
Yes, and Calvin, thank you so much as well. It's always a pleasure to have you on board. And a huge thank you to you for joining me for your company today. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. I'll be back on Friday afternoon. Remember, you can catch up with the show. All you have to do is check out the GB News app, where you can watch all of the programmes that we have here at GB News. We are the People's Channel, so make sure you stay tuned to us. I'll see you next week on Friday at 4. I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy with limited sunshine and outbreaks of rain in the west and southwest. Let's take a look at the details. It'll be a cloudy evening across southwest England with patchy outbreaks of rain. The rain heaviest in the north and over the moors, although some brighter spells are possible too. The southeast of England will be mostly cloudy too, but it'll be drier in general. A little light rain is